Imagine being able to get a ton of XP and also make yourself a ton of money. Well, that's what this video is going to be based upon, because we are farming raiders on labs, and I'm going to run through all of the things that you need to do and why it is a good method, and also some of the extra bits that you can do alongside the actual method to make some money if you're interested in doing that alongside actually getting gear or just simply getting the XP that you can from raiders, because not only do they have good ammunition, they have sometimes got good gear, and you can find them with contact 4s, you can find them with various different headsets, and sometimes they can have decent weapons as well that you can level up your weapon maintenance skill. So with that being said, if you enjoy these types of videos, make sure to like it, but we'll get into this one directly. And so the first thing that we want to talk about is how do you get raiders to spawn, what are the mechanics behind raiders actually spawning on labs, and what do you need to do to make this method more efficient. The first thing is that raiders typically do not spawn at the very beginning of a raid within labs. So when you first spawn in, at least with the newest edition of PVE, you don't have them instantly spawning in. Now previously they seemed to do that, but now what they have is essentially PMC spawning instantly, and then you essentially have raiders spawning about after 5 minutes of being in the raid, roughly, is when you'll maybe see the first spawn of raiders. The first spawn of random raiders is essentially just could be anywhere on the map. They can just randomly spawn in a wide variety of locations, and so almost like PMCs would spawn, they aren't really in specific places that you go to, and there will always be raiders, but they just spawn in kind of waves on labs. And so once you've kind of done the first couple of raiders, maybe you found them, maybe you didn't, if you want to guarantee yourself actual raiders within the game, the best way to do it is to hit up all of the extract buttons. Now you can do this by opening the gate within the lab, which you can find at one end of the map. But the most common way that I've been doing it, and probably the easiest way to kind of be the safest way as well, is going down into the basement, where you can essentially turn on the elevators for the medical bay elevator, as well as actually finding yourself some of the other elevators, such as the one that is literally downstairs in the actual area itself. As you can see, these are the two actual elevators and the buttons associated with each of them. They're very close to where they are, and of course you can then extract quite easily once you've opened up these buttons. Now usually I will do this when I actually want the raiders to spawn. So at the beginning of a raid, maybe you want to go in, do a bit of looting, take out a couple of PMCs, which will give you extra XP, and then kind of get a bit of gear to start off with, and then go and fight the raiders, so you can then take them out and then you can extract, because it seems to be the best and most fluid way of doing it. Usually I'll loot first, then I'll go and actually turn on the raiders and then take them out and then get out of the raid, because it just makes it a lot easier. You can get loot, and that way you can kind of min-max the loot without taking weapons with you that you're only going to drop on the floor, and only really taking the stuff that you actually want from the raiders, which isn't everything, and often it's usually ammunition from my standpoint, and sometimes you can find yourself some actual nades that are actually on them, but for the most part it's trying to find those kind of rarer items like the headphones and everything like that that you can get within labs itself and the raiders themselves. So labs raiders, pretty simple in terms of how they work. The key way in actually taking them out is to focus on essentially narrowing down the corridors and being able to find them in kind of small locations where you can lob nades. Now nades are one of your biggest friends on labs because of the fact that they always bunch up together, and often raiders will spawn in a group of 2 to 4. So in a group of 2 to 4, a well-placed nade can actually get rid of them all in one go, which obviously is going to net you a lot of money in terms of their gear or whatever, and potentially a ton of XP as well. And I've been able to take out multiple raiders, probably averaging anywhere from about 4 to 6 raiders roughly, when you're purely focusing on trying to farm those raiders. Of course there's more on the map. There can be upwards of 8, 10, 12, it depends how long you're actually in the lab itself and how many of the extract buttons that you do press. Typically when you do press the extract buttons, they'll spawn next to where the extract actually is, or somewhat close to where that extract is, rather than kind of spawning on the other side of the map. So that's something that is always good about doing this, as opposed to trying to hunt down the raiders, because they can be pretty broken if they do see you and, you know, they're on the other side of the dark passageway or something like that. You really want to be in a more lighted area and kind of just making sure that you can lob a load of nades and go out of the raid pretty safely. And that's kind of the best way to do it, going down into the corridor. In terms of extra loot areas and places that I do go and actually loot with the new changes that came in with the PVE update for patch 0.15 and all of the subsequent updates, usually I will hit up the black room. It's pretty much the only room that is kind of guaranteed to give you at least profit in some regard. I found a ton of lead X's in there. I think I found 3 or 4 lead X's out of about 7 uses, so pretty good. It's about every other raid I found a lead X, if not more. And so yeah, it's been very, very consistent in lead X's and basically making up for the cost of the key. Plus you get an absolute ton of stims. If you get 2 mules in there, you've basically made your money back for the entire room, and it's not too kind of out of the way to actually get 2 mules in the black room itself, since there can be anywhere from about 12 stims to 14 stims, somewhere in that range, kind of as it is right now. It can be more, it can be less, you know, it depends what the room is. If you're not entirely sure and you want to do a quick check before you go in the room, you can essentially just look through the glass that is right there and you can have a quick check. Sometimes you'll actually see the lead X on the floor, which knows, right, I'm going to open the room for guaranteed, even if I know that there's like less stims lying about the place. And obviously there's 2 spawns that are, or maybe even 3 spawns that are actually over to the right hand side as you're looking in through the glass, which you can't really see. You can only see one of those spawns. So yeah, there's about 4 lead X spawns I think in the room itself. So it is a very, very good and high chance of actually getting one, and I've consistently been getting them over the course of time. Now, Black Room isn't the only one that I actually do loot. I go up to Green Room now. The Green Room and Green Room card has actually come down in price a little bit, so it's a bit more manageable to actually purchase, and often you can make your money back just based on the stims, because stims obviously sell to therapists for anywhere from like 20 to 50k roughly, depending on what the stim they are. And if you get some decent ones, SJ6s, ETGs, mules, that sort of stuff, they can be anywhere from 100 to 200k. Top end is mules at 200k, SJ6 is about 90 to 100, and so depending on time of day they can sell for different prices. But overall, that's kind of what you can do. It's been working really well. I've been hitting up the green room. Sometimes I'll go and check the blue room, but it depends if I can just see that there's loot in the blue room. Most of the time you don't really find a whole lot of loot within the blue room, and you're really looking to find that key card that can spawn in there, and you can actually do it by looking through the glass. And actually, if there is items that are right next to where the glass is, you can actually see your indicator. You can't pick it up from outside of the room, but you can see the indicator noting that there is loot there, which sometimes you can miss if you're not actually looking properly, or maybe it's a bit hard to see. So you can do that if you aren't sure, and of course you can check on the chairs and on the desk directly in front of you through the glass. But yeah, and of course as you're looking at the door, there can be a stim on the actual little bench directly as you enter through the first blue door, and so it's worth checking there, seeing what stim it is, and if it's a good one, maybe it's worth opening the room. It's about 350k per use of the blue room, so it's quite expensive, but yeah, you can probably make your money back most of the time, but you're really not going to make a huge amount of profit, because you can have rooms where you basically lose maybe 150k, and you, at least me personally, haven't found a huge amount of the high value loot, which is going to boost that price average significantly higher to make it actually worth doing. So yeah, it's a room to potentially open, and I always check it first, and before I open it I usually don't just go screw it, I'll open it. Usually I will actually check and make sure that it is actually there, and that it is worth opening. Other notable rooms, the violet room and the yellow room are probably the other 2 that I would recommend opening, but they are on the other side of the map, and so if you're comfortable with going to the other side of the map, absolutely do it. If you're not too comfortable and you're not entirely sure whether you want to go and delve over that way, if you've been kind of focused in that side of the map, then, you know, it's absolutely fine. But they are rooms that you can hit up maybe if you spawn over that side at the beginning, checking those rooms at the beginning when there aren't raiders on the game or in the map, and then going in afterwards and kind of progressing that way. I think that is probably a good way to do it. But of course, that's down to you and your own personal preference and stuff like that. So hopefully this video gives you a brief overview of both the raiders, farming raiders, and some of the rooms that are actually worth opening on labs. We'll do a full breakdown video of like a full opening all of the keycards and checking how much each one of those actually make you, which ones lost me money, and kind of the general gist of what I've been finding when I did actually use those keycards over the course of multiple uses so far. And I'll give you kind of the best ones that I found to give you the most money back for those keycards that you're spending on lab. So if that sounds like good, make sure to subscribe down below. It'll be coming out soon, and I will see you in the next one. Have a great rest of the day. Goodbye.